Moral Orel is an underrated Adult Swim masterpiece. It's a biting satire of societal corruption, religious fundamentalism, psychological trauma, and at times, relationships. With that in mind, which relationships in this show are healthy, and which are the most toxic? We did a good to evil on this show a couple years ago, so we think it's about time to go back to Moralton, Statesota, to find the answer to this question. I'm Dan with WickedBinge, and this is Moral Orel Relationships, Healthy to Toxic. It speaks volumes as to how toxic so many of the relationships in this show are when there is only one that we deem healthy. This single healthy relationship is that of Orel and Kristijan. One day, the Posabule family moves in next to the Puppingtons, and they get along instantly as they are mirror images of each other in both looks and personality. So for Orel and Kristijan, it was love at first sight. They shared many things in common, especially their love for God. However, when both families find out that they say the Lord's Prayer differently, they are forbidden from seeing each other. Of course, being kids, this does not stop them from sneaking out at night to see each other. Kristijan's family eventually moves away, but when the annual arm's length dance comes around, Orel takes her as his date. While all the other kids there dance together awkwardly and, well, at arm's length, Orel and Kristijan are the only couple that are actually happy in each other's arms, with nothing but love in their eyes. If that wasn't enough, the end of the series reveals that they eventually get married and have a family. A relationship couldn't get healthier than this. And just like with the healthy, we only have one relationship in the gray area as well. And that is the store owner, Sal Figarelli, and his wife. Whenever they are on screen together, the Figarellis seem to get along fine, with the exception of one scene where the missus is seen slapping her husband and running out of the house crying while he screams, indicating that he can sometimes be abusive. When Orel asks Sal why he screamed at his wife after she ran out, he tells him that's the only way to get rid of him. The Figarellis narrowly avoid the toxic category because they are not seen together often. If we did and saw more abusive behavior, that's probably where they would go. Quite underwhelming, huh? Well, don't worry. We've entered what is quite possibly the spiciest toxic category we've ever covered in these series of videos. We start off with Clay's parents, Arthur and Angela. When Clay was a kid, his mother Angela gave preferential treatment to him over her husband because she had 10 miscarriages, making Clay her miracle child, thus becoming overly attached to him. Meanwhile, the only attention Arthur got from his wife was negative, putting a strain on their marriage. Arthur constantly had to walk on eggshells to not trigger Angela with certain words as to not give her severe PTSD, namely God and dead or anything containing the latter like loaded. However, the marriage ended when Angela died of a heart attack when Clay woke up after pulling a prank of him killing himself with Arthur's gun. Arthur was so distraught by his wife's death that he became an atheist and put all the blame on Clay, frequently slapping him. We're placing their relationship the highest in the toxic category because the two were happy together at one point of their lives, before the birth of their son. Next are Carl and Kim. When you think of a toxic relationship, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Abusive couples? Violent couples? Those that have marriages falling apart? What about couples that love each other too much? That's Carl and Kim. Despite having graduated high school years ago, they still have the immature mentalities of jock and cheerleader archetypes. With that said, they do what you'd imagine high school sweethearts would do if alone: make out, fool around, and have sex. But Carl and Kim are grown adults that do those things almost 24/7, and that's not healthy. What makes this worse is that they have a son, Doey, that they completely neglect. They give the kid money to keep himself fed and occupied, thinking that he can live out on his own while they get their alone time. They are being placed a spot lower because while Clay got physically abused by Arthur, these two practically force Doey to take care of himself, which can end up being worse for a child. At the end of the day, Carl and Kim present the perfect argument as to why a relationship can still be toxic even if both partners are happy. The bronze medal of toxic goes to Principal Fakey and his wife. Principal Fakey was in an affair with Nurse Bendy for a very long time, and his wife was completely unaware of it. This explains why Fakey was always uninterested in her attempts at flirtation. Eventually, Fakey started to feel guilty about his affair, and went to the church's confession booth to get help. Reverend Putty did absolutely nothing to help, but once Orel stepped in and gave him advice, he started feeling denial. When Principal Fakey found out he got an STD from Nurse Bendy, he blamed it on his wife's non-existent infidelity and kicked her out of the house. Spoiler alert, the bottom two relationships also involve affairs, but since this is the least toxic, it only gets the bronze. The silver medal of toxic goes to Clay and Coach Stopframe. Throughout the series, Clay cheats on his wife Bloberta with Orel's coach Daniel Stopframe. However, this relationship is very one-sided. Stopframe is extremely obsessive and will do anything to get as close to Clay as possible. It all started when he had sex with Bloberta so he could have a kid that's also Clay's kid, which turns out to be Shapey. He also used this opportunity to steal a picture of Clay. And in the present day, he prayed to both God and Satan. He asked Orel to get a piece of Clay's hair for him, and was even willing to sacrifice Orel in a satanic love acquisition ritual, which thankfully never happened due to a misunderstanding. Stopframe eventually disconnected himself with Clay after seeing him with Miss Censordoll, as well as realizing how pathetic Clay really was as a person. Even though he does eventually back off, Stopframe constantly took to extreme, unhealthy measures to try to get to Clay, and since this was also an affair, it gets the silver medal. Finally, the gold medal of toxic goes to Orel's parents, Clay and Bloberta. Where do we even begin with these two? Well, let's start from the beginning. Coming from a family where she was the black sheep middle child, Bloberta wanted to get married to a man so she could escape her family. The perfect candidate seemed to be an innocent, God-fearing Clay, but once she introduced him to alcohol, she soon realized her mistake after he got drunk. As a married couple, Clay became a bitter alcoholic, while Bloberta became a Leave It to Beaver-esque housewife who is constantly knitting, cooking, and especially cleaning obsessively. When around each other, the two are stoic at best. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Bloberta withholds sex from Clay by installing a wall called the Lust Guard between their beds, but that doesn't stop them from seeing other people behind each other's backs. Clay and Coach Stopframe have their affair as discussed in our previous entry, and Bloberta once desperately tried and ultimately failed to have one of her own. And speaking of Stopframe, Bloberta revealed to Clay one Christmas that their youngest son Shapey came from an affair between her and the coach, again stated in the previous entry. This almost caused them to divorce. Lastly, they aren't exactly parents of the year either, as when Shapey accidentally gets switched with Block, they don't notice one bit, and Bloberta never calls out Clay when he abuses Orel. These two are the definition of a toxic relationship, full of poor decisions, alcohol, and affairs. They have done every possible thing to turn themselves into unhappy, broken people. With that said, Clay and Bloberta more than deserve the gold medal of toxic. But we're not done yet. We're going to award some medals to the couples that deserve them the most. The Darwin Medal goes to Carl and Kim. They still have the mentality of high schoolers and think they can take care of their kid just by giving him money to get what he wants. And on that note, we'll give them the Sloth Medal because they'd rather spend all day doing the deed than properly take care of him. The Lust Medal will be given to Clay and Coach Stopframe. Stopframe is obsessed with Clay and will go as far as to perform something like a satanic ritual to get him. The Wrath Medal will be given to Arthur and Angela, as the former would beat his son because he blamed him for his wife's death. The Gluttony Medal goes to Clay and Bloberta because after all, it was alcohol that started their disastrous relationship. And last but not least, they'll also get the Envy Medal as their consistent unhappiness leads them to resort to affairs. But let us know in the comment section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge more of our videos. But most importantly, stay wicked.